A bonus tip will be to remember that with music licensing, and this applies to music in general, the listener has to be 50% right in predicting what's going to happen next and 50% wrong. Now, what does this mean? What it means is that as a listener, if I'm listening to a piece of music and I can predict what's happening on the next section or the next verse or chorus or something might happen, I need to be right 50% of the time predicting what's happening. So when that part comes, and this is as a first time listener, when that part comes, I must be able to have predicted that something good is coming, that something that is going to engage me as a listener in that piece of music. And I need to be 50% of the times wrong so I can get surprised and get excited, like, oh, I didn't expect that part to actually kick in here, but it sounds amazing. Hello, thank you for tuning in. My name is Mario Carrizales from stockmusiclicensing.com. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the three main components of music composition. When you're writing your music track, especially when it comes down to music for film or for TV, music licensing in general, it's very important to have these three aspects, if you will, which are crucial for your success or for your music to have success in the licensing world. And those three components are the composition, the arrangement, and the production. We cannot have one without the other, and it's very important to keep in mind this. And as a beginner or even as an experienced composer, you need to know that these three aspects of components are an essential role for your tracks to stand a chance to be licensed. Now, let's talk about the composition. The composition is where it all starts. This is something that as a musician, as a composer, we decide what chords are we going to be using, what kind of melodies and motifs are going to be used in the composition. And this could be, the main instrument could be a piano, it could be a guitar. It really doesn't matter what instrumentation we're using. What matters is how this music piece is being composed, meaning what is going to be the very first chord, what's going to be the second chord, what kind of emotion it evokes, and what kind of melody we have, what kind of harmonies these chords are making. And we want to be able to create an emotion with these very basic elements. And the crucial thing here to have to keep in mind is that the music should already evoke something by just playing it on that first instrument or in the instrument where it was written. So if I'm playing a piece of piano or I'm composing something on a piano, I should be able to listen to just a composition on the piano and see the whole chord progression happening, plus the melodies and all the harmonies, so I can feel something and almost like imagine or envision the rest of the band, if you will, and how can it all fit together as a full-on production. So after we have written the composition and you have those very basic elements of the raw elements, if you will, of your music track, we go into the arrangement. And in the arrangement is where you actually start messing around or taking it away certain aspects of that melody, and you put them in a different order, or you just shuffle them around, if you will. This is the best way for me to explain it to you. So you can see that you have the very first four chord progressions or the very first idea of the composition, and then in the arrangement you say, how many times am I going to repeat this same 4-bar loop, if you will? Or how many times is this melody going to be appearing? Is it going to appear again in the next section? Or is it only going to appear after the verse or the chorus? And that's why it's important as composers to really divide your music tracks in sections. So meaning that you will have an intro, a verse, even though we're not singing, or at least I'm not going to be singing anytime soon. So it will be the verse, and then there will be the chorus or the pre-chorus, and then the chorus. And the chorus will be like the big, where the hook is happening. This is where the ear candy and all the melodies, this is what people are going to remember, okay? And after that, what happens? Is there going to be a drop, or is it going to go back to a verse or a B section, if you will? So that will be the arrangement, and that has to be very wisely put, so it can keep the tune moving. Now in music licensing, because it's instrumentals, or the majorities are instrumentals, we really have to be careful of not repeating ourselves too much And usually the way it works is that doing just a small adjustments to the actual composition in the arrangement part, it could make a lot of difference by just changing a few chords, introducing new elements every 4 bars or every 8 bars, and really spicing up that main idea or that composition. Now, number 3 will be, and finally, the production. The production, it all has to do with the final product, how this song sounds, the actual quality. The production, it has to do with anything that implies using EQ, compression, to make sure that all the dynamic range of all the instruments are where they need to be. And how does this music is being produced? Meaning how many parts do you need, how many guitar parts, how many string parts do you need at a certain point, where once the arrangement is being determined, you should have some kind of flow of energy, so when it gets to the chorus, there's this massive explosion, if you will, and it's all about tension and release, always like or question and answering. That's what music is. And obviously this type of process starts in the composition, starts in the very early stages of the music composition. So when you get to the production, you're just really amplifying that by making sure that it becomes more obvious, or it's a little bit more intentional. So you're just really focusing on those elements and say, how can I increase the impact of this emotion or this melody better? How can I make it better? And that's what the production is. And it has to be the quality is what is going to determine a good production. So, I mean, you can have a nice demo, a very raw elements of the composition with an acoustic guitar and maybe some random notes here and there, and it will evoke that feeling. But you need to have a very polished production of that music track, so it could be out there in the world competing with other music tracks, and not only competing. I don't like using the word competition so much, but actually to have that quality that has some kind of commercial use, that has some kind of it needs to have that thing, that quality that all this music has. So it has to be professional, and we can do that all nowadays with a computer and in our DAWs at home. Now, these are 3 elements that are crucial regardless of the genre that you're writing music, okay? And this is something that for the beginner is really hard to comprehend, because we usually become obsessed with the main idea, meaning that we'll get stuck in the writing process at the very early stage, and we may get stuck in a loop. I can tell you that from experience. And you just get obsessed with a main idea, and maybe you can go as far to write in a melody, but then you are afraid of getting out of that loop. And how do you embark into the arrangement part, which is where you start kind of like moving around different chords in order to create some kind of like movement, and the energy can flow a little bit better without sounding so repetitive. Even though in music licensing we want to have some kind of repetition, but without sounding boring, because remember that the music is going to be used on a video or a presentation. It could be a YouTube video, it could be a keynote presentation, a slideshow presentation. So we don't want a very drastic changes, but we don't want sudden stops and sudden silences of the music. And then you know, when you're watching something and there's a massive silence, especially if it's a presentation, for the listener this might distract the actual experience of the presentation. So it's important to have some kind of repetition and almost like be predictable that what's happened afterwards. So a bonus tip will be to remember that with music licensing, and this applies to music in general, the listener has to be 50% right in predicting what's going to happen next, and 50% wrong. Now, what does this mean? What it means is that as a listener, if I'm listening to a piece of music and I can predict what's happening on the next section or the next verse or chorus, or something might happen, I need to be right 50% of the time predicting what's happening. So when that part comes, and this is as a first-time listener, when that part comes, I must be able to have predicted that something good is coming, that something that is going to engage me as a listener in that piece of music. And I need to be 50% of the times wrong so I can get surprised and get excited, like, oh, I didn't expect that part to actually kick in here, but it sounds amazing. Keep that in mind. The listener, you want to make sure that the listener, your client, or anybody that's going to be listening to your music has to be always 50% of the times right and 50% of the times wrong in predicting what's happening in your music, how your music is going to flow, and what's going to be happening on the next chorus, the next verse, how is it going to end. You know, they must be able to predict that they could be right, but not always should be the case, because if they can predict very easily, then that means that the music will sound boring to them. And if they can't predict what's happening, let's say that they're listening to a piece of jazz music, and you can't predict where is it going, then they don't understand it, and therefore they think that is too complex or too complicated. So, and therefore it's just not engaging enough, so they can't predict what's happening. That's just a bonus tip to always keep in mind, that as a listener, you should put yourself in the listener's shoes always, and always be thinking of how can I show something new every 4 bars or every 8 bars, and how can I emphasize in those changes. And this is the part that is difficult, because you could write a good piece of music, you can compose 3-4 chords and a melody, but how can you develop that to a full-blown 2-minute song or a track that flows very naturally, and it can work in many situations when it comes down to music licensing, either as a film or a presentation or a YouTube video. So keep that in mind. I think this is the bonus tip is that's gold. Okay, if you take anything from this video, is that the listener needs to be 50% of the time right and 50% of the time wrong. Remember that. Anyways, I hope this video finds you well. I hope that is helpful to you. I want to do more videos on how to compose music, focusing on all those little aspects and different tricks of the trade, or those little hacks, if you will. I hate the word hacks. Just my daughter's been watching a lot of hacks lately on YouTube. But these little techniques is the word. When it comes down to music composition, that once you understand this and once you have internalized this and you can see them in action, which I'm going to be showing to you in future videos, of how can you put this into practice, and how can you pretty much predict what's going to happen in the next part of your music composition by arranging it in such a way that it's almost like a blueprint, and you just can have a lot of fun with it, and know that you have to work with only 4 bars at a time. And that way you can build your song. So you focus on your intro, that could be 4 bars, and then after that intro will be the verse, that's another 4 bars. And you just focus on those 4 elements, and obviously you have to really analyze it and go deeper and say, okay, I have these chords, which are the main chord progression, and it's in the key of C or whatever. And that's going to go into the verse, and then in the verse I need to introduce some kind of melody at some point, and it better be fast, because in music licensing you can't wait for a minute of intro, and so there's so many little details to put into place that by me sharing this with you, it can hopefully make you think less and write more music and have fun in the process and not get so overwhelmed by it. So anyways, I'm working on music. I'm still working on crime TV music, using only the free samples from the free orchestra. I'm going to show you a little bit of how I developed this music track, probably in the next video, where I can address this same topics or same aspects that I'm telling you on this video, which is again the composition, how to write that music track, the arrangement, and the production, and how that is all packaged together as a final product and be put out into the world, so people can purchase it on royalty-free libraries and then can get placements on TV and film. Again, if you're somebody that is new to music licensing in general, download my free guide, link in the description, and as always, rock and roll, and here's to your success.